more widely, rippling down through the centuries and affecting Scotland to this day.
The fight for national identity. A History of Scotland continues tomorrow at 9 on BBC One Scotland.
Now on BBC One Scotland, as the first Scottish lifeboat station in Fraserburgh celebrates its 150th anniversary, Phil Cunningham looks back at the history of the RNLI in Scotland.
The coast of Scotland can be a wild and dangerous place. Shipwrecks have claimed the lives of thousands of sailors, fishermen and fun seekers. But 150 years ago, a voluntary rescue service took root in Fraserburgh, which challenged the supremacy of the sea and the elements.
When the RNLI took over lifeboat stations, there was a defined standard. People knew they were going to be there 24/7, 365 days a year.
You can't imagine it, what it's like now compared to those days. We've got engines to drive our boats. They had oars.
There was no wheelhouse, open cockpit. There's no nice musto gear to wear. It's all oilskins and boots. You're frozen half the time and wet.
There have been superhuman rescues.
You're looking at lumps of water, 30 feet, 40 feet in height, and you're jumping up and down, and one of the boys says, you know, if we're in Blackpool, they would charge us for this.
They are truly remarkable people who do this, their genuine desire to go out, often in the most appalling conditions, to save people whose lives are in danger at sea.
You're in a lifeboat, you don't ask if they're Mohammedans or Catholics or they smoke or don't smoke or anything like that, you just go and do the job.
Lifeboat crews are no strangers to tragedy.
First shout, well, the one that really sticks in my memory is
when I went out, he just advised the boat's down, and we went away down and we saw the human chain, you know, trying to get the bodies out of the water.
The papers described me as the luckiest man in Fraserburgh. I'm missing the lifeboat.
This is the story of the real Fourth Emergency Service.
Once when a lifeboat was being launched in the teeth of a gale, someone said to the coxswain, "You can't go out in the sea like that, you'll never come back." And the coxswain replied, "We have to go out. We don't have to come back."
Fraserburgh sits on the exposed northeast coast of Scotland. Its deep inshore waters provide a natural harbour, and for generations the town has been one of the main fishing ports in the country. But it faces the perilous North Sea, and hundreds of vessels have come to grief in storms or on dangerous rocks. The Royal National Lifeboat Institution had been founded in England by Sir William Hillary. When it was looking for somewhere to establish its first station in Scotland, Fraserburgh was an obvious choice. The boathouse opened 150 years ago, in October 1858.
The tide can be fairly strong, especially between Kinnaird Head here and Rattray and the Beacon that you see out the back here. The tide can be very, very strong. A head drop ready to go ashore, a head drop fast. Head drop fast.
Albert Sutherland was coxswain of the Fraserburgh lifeboat for 15 years. Albert and his crew launched nearly 170 times, saving 115 lives. People like Albert are the backbone of the RNLI in Scotland.
Well, that's warm now, George, eh? When the Maroons went off, you would have raced your brother to get to the boat. It was first into the boat who's good on the boat. And what compelled you to do that is just a desire to be on the boat. a desire to put something back into the community, saving life.
About 15 years ago, me and 3 friends were foolishly playing down here at this the harbour breakwater. Waves were crashing over the top. As I was making my way down these steps, a massive lump of water came over the breakwater and knocked me off my feet onto this concrete where we're standing.
The sea was coming over the top and they were soaked. We all commented on the fact that we were going to get a good licking when they went home.
Eventually, I was thrown into the harbour, but with the swell being so big, I was knocked against the harbour wall and knocked unconscious.
And he was actually floating with his back up, with air in the Vika jacket he had on. And that was what was keeping the boy up on top of the water. He was floating under the jacket.
My heart had stopped, basically dead at this moment in time, so it was Tommy Summers and Graham Campbell got me aboard the boat and got working on me.
And I can mind Tommy shouting, "There's a pulse, there's a beat." And as the blood started to come rolling about his body again, every cut and bruise in his head and his hands and his every bare bit of flesh, they just started to weep blood. Again, it was a miracle really to see it happening. It was life coming back into his body.
The bravery and the courage that these guys showed that day, because 9 times out of 10 these guys are not out on days like today, sunshine, it's cruel seas. They're just so brave, and the courage they show to rescue people, save people's life, you can't comprehend how important a job they do.
The RNLI is called out more than 1,000 times a year to rescue people around Scotland's 6,000 miles of coastline. Fraserborough's 1858 boat was similar to this, 30 feet long and 7.5 feet wide. It boasted 10 oars and it cost £182, 1 shilling and 2 pence. While the boats have changed since then, some things have remained the same. Victor Sutherland is Albert's nephew, and as the current Fraserborough cox, he's carrying on a long family tradition.
The RNLI did provide a lifeboat to Fraserborough in 1831, and then they fully established a new lifeboat and a new boathouse in 1858. The fact we're the first one in Scotland, a huge thing for the local community. It's just a very proud moment for the Fraserborough lifeboat crew. I've now been coxing here for 3 years. I'm very proud of the fact for the past 30 years there's been a lot of involvement at the station with the Sutherland family. Also my brother David, he's one of our deputy second coxswains, and my cousin Bully's a deputy second coxswain as well, so we've still got a good family connection.
The Sutherlands are typical of dozens of families across Scotland whose loved ones have volunteered for the RNLI.
Once you're happy, Stuart and Boz will recover the casualty on board. Okay lads, that's fine.
The volunteer ethos goes right back to the start of the RNLI with the establishment of both these private lifeboat stations and then the RNLI coming in, taking over in some cases and moving forwards. They're all part of a community, and I think it's a carry-on from those days. The community took it upon themselves to try and prevent the dreadful loss of life at sea. They are there supporting the lifeboat.
The support is there in good times and bad. Margaret Clark often suffered the agony of wondering if her husband Hewitt and his crew would make it back through the teeth of a gale to Lerwick in Shetland.
Quite often after like a major rescue, Hewitt would never speak about it for 2 or 3 days, and I would never ask him because I knew he was still all keyed up inside and he had to come down to earth again in his own time, and if he wanted to speak about it, he would, but I would never ask him because I didn't think that was fair.
Yes, the men wanted to volunteer to join the lifeboat crews, but they needed the support of their families. They were encouraging them. That was a huge incentive for the crew members. It was a huge challenge for the families, and to know their men were being called out in bad weather was all part of the way the RNLI worked, a very important part.
Until well into the 20th century, most lifeboat crew were fishermen. In those days, the volunteers knew their local waters and needed little training. Above all, they had to be strong, determined and courageous.
How they coped, launching in the Pentland Firth, the north of Scotland, on wild evenings, wild nights to try and go out to the rescue with sailors and oars. It's very difficult to comprehend the strength, the fortitude. It must have been a very, very difficult task indeed.
The earliest lifeboats were basically rowing boats. They owed their design to men like William Woodhave, Lionel Lucan, and Henry Greathead. These vessels used cork for buoyancy and had high bows and sterns, like the segment of an orange. They were made to re-right if they capsized, but the boats were unstable in bad weather.
Some of the crews weren't all that happy with the way they performed, felt they would self-right, but they felt quite vulnerable in them.
The coxswains who didn't like self-righting ones were probably the more traditional lifeboatmen, and they were used to their own ways.
In 1887, Scottish naval architect George Watson began to reverse the trend. His designs were big and heavy, better for extreme weather and seas.
For a period, the RNLI built some lifeboats of that era, which weren't of self-righting, because they felt they were more powerful boats, stronger, tougher boats, and probably the likelihood of anything happening to them was less likely.
The introduction of steam lifeboats in 1890, then petrol and diesel engines, revolutionised rescue. They gave more control than sails and oars. They increased a lifeboat's range and allowed coxswains to mount ever more daring rescues. But even with power, the sea was sometimes still too strong. This grainy footage of the 1952 Bridlington disaster in Yorkshire shows just how easily motorised lifeboats could capsize. Even though the boat righted itself, one of the crew was lost. The 1950s and 60s saw welcome advances as radar and VHF radio were introduced. Helicopters cooperated with lifeboats for the first time. And the boat that's played a huge part in saving lives at sea around Scotland was launched.
Being low in the water, the IRB is ideal for coming quickly up alongside swimmers, canoeists or others in the sea and pulling them quickly aboard.
Many people said this is not what the RNLI should be doing, that this is not the tradition of lifeboats and pulling in and say. But in fact, it was soon recognised that for a particular, it's having the right equipment to deal with the incidents as they occur. And an inshore lifeboat, of course, for beach rescues and close to the coast, had a role to play. And very soon, lifeboat stations around the country recognised that this boat it complemented the traditional lifeboats. It added to them, supplemented them, if you like, added to the ability to deal with so many different sorts of incidents.
During the Second World War, many crew members had joined the armed forces. Lifeboats were used in the evacuation of Dunkirk, but they still had a vital function to perform in protecting shipping around the UK. In 1941, off Arbroath, a dredger was being bombed by the Luftwaffe.
My father, he was coxswain. By the time they got there, the aeroplane had gone, but they dropped a bomb in the hold of the dredger.
The rescue was immortalised in the boys' comic The Hornet.
We could hear the bombs and the machine guns going off, just enough out of the harbour. They kept going straight out, stemming the boat, dredging, until the Germans stopped strapping them. And my father and them, they didn't have to take anybody off or anything, but he got the bronze medal for that. He just kept going out to see what was wrong. We're passing the news agents, and me and my father, we said, well, there's you in the comics. And you're doing away with Corky the Cat and putting you instead.
There were many other rescues off the Scottish coast during the war years. In January 1942, the Peterhead lifeboat was called to save 3 steamers in the bay. In hurricane-force winds and driving snow, coxswain John McLean and his crew saved 106 sailors. Their mission lasted 54 hours. The whole crew were awarded gallantry medals, with McLean receiving a gold. Scotland's rugged shoreline is a magnet for ships in treacherous weather, and maritime accidents are common. Lifeboats too have paid a heavy price.